My name is Rebecca, I'm 31 years old, and I live and work in Chicago. I never imagined that a trip I thought would be filled with love would become the reason I could never see my family the same way again. It was a winter weekend morning, snow falling so heavily that the streetlights looked like faint glowing dots in the wind. I left at 6 a.m., driving over 8 hours through icy roads to a small town in Vermont where my family was throwing an engagement party for my sister Caroline. In the passenger seat was a carefully wrapped wedding cake box. Quiet like a sweet secret, it was a 2-tier red velvet cake with cream cheese frosting, decorated with sugar flowers. Caroline once called it my high school dream. I had ordered the cake from a famous bakery nearly 2 weeks earlier and paid extra for it to be freshly made that morning. Not because I had time to spare, but because I loved my sister enough to trade comfort for her smile. I wore a fitted black dress, layered it with a beige coat, and changed into heels in a gas station restroom along the way. Every time I looked in the mirror, I told myself, I'm doing this for Caroline, because she's worth it. When my car turned onto the driveway of the estate hosting the party, I nearly lost my breath. The house glowed like a fairy tale in the snowy forest. Warm yellow lights wrapped around the trees, silver white ribbons swayed gently in the wind. I remember whispering, Caroline won't forget me after this. The words echoed inside the car like a fragile little prayer. I handed the keys to the valet. He raised an eyebrow when he saw me step out holding the cake box. Are you with the wedding catering? He asked, polite but distant. I smiled, relieved, thinking he was joking. No, I'm the bride's sister. He nodded, said nothing more. I walked into the foyer, where the scent of vanilla candles mixed with soft violin music from inside. But strangely, no one came to greet me. No hug, no how was the drive. Just a few guests glancing my way and quickly looking away. Like I was a stranger who had walked into the wrong house. I held the cake box tightly and continued into the main hall, where Caroline stood beside her fiancé, Ethan, wearing an ivory satin dress, soft curls framing a face always praised as the family jewel. She was laughing brightly with her friends. Until she saw me. Caroline's smile vanished in an instant. You actually came, she asked, eyes narrowing like she couldn't believe it. 8 hours through heavy snow, of course I came. Surprise? I said, trying to keep my tone light. Caroline didn't take the cake box. She didn't step closer either. She just said, I didn't think you'd come, with the weather and all. I'd placed the box beside a macaron tray, still trying to smile. Well, it's your special day. Behind her, one of the bridesmaids whispered loudly enough, She's not on the guest list, right? I heard every word. My heart cracked. Caroline glanced at her but said nothing, then turned away. Seconds later, she leaned toward Ethan and walked off down the hallway. I stood there in my damp coat among unfamiliar faces. People passed me like I was a mismatched decoration. That was when I realized I wasn't an unexpected guest. I was a name crossed out, and maybe crossed out a long time ago. I decided to find my mother. If anyone could understand why I showed up, if anyone might see the effort I'd made, I still wanted to believe it was her. She stood near the fireplace, wearing a wine-red velvet dress, a silk scarf around her neck, holding a glass of white wine like a speaker ready to take the stage. As I approached, she looked over her shoulder, set the glass down, and didn't meet my eyes. Rebecca, she said softly, as if afraid someone might hear. I didn't think you'd actually come. Why not? I asked, trying to sound calm. I messaged a week ago, no one replied, but I still hoped. She cut me off. Quickly, firmly. Let's not make this complicated. Today is Caroline's day. Let's not turn it into something else. I gripped my purse strap. What do you mean? She sighed, turned fully toward me, offering a faint, polite smile. I mean, you tend to draw a lot of attention. Let the event flow quietly. Don't become the center. I smiled, but there was no joy in it. I just drove almost 9 hours through snow to bring Caroline her favorite cake. I thought, that might mean something. Rebecca, my mother said, her eyes colder than the winter wind. Sometimes kindness is all about timing. Her words echoed in my head as I wandered around the hall. Soft jazz played in the background. People floated past me like wind. No one asked if I needed anything. No one asked if I was cold. In the center of the room was a photo display of Caroline and Ethan, each frame carefully chosen, walking hand in hand through Central Park, Caroline holding tulips in a white sweater, Ethan smiling as he proposed by the river. All perfect, and absolutely none of me. Not one picture. I went to the reception table where the guest list and seating chart were displayed. I scanned every name, every printed surname on ivory paper. Old college friends of Caroline, a woman our grandmother met twice at a charity gala, but not me. A staff member caught my glance. She smiled gently. "Excuse me, can I help you?" I pointed to the seating map. "I'm the bride's sister. I don't see my name." She checked the list carefully. "Rebecca Collins?" "Yeah." She bit her lip. "I'm sorry, maybe you're an unexpected guest?" "No, I'm family." She nodded slightly, then stepped back. I stood there, frozen inside. Around me, joyful wishes rang out like no one noticed I was unraveling. I found an empty chair near the dessert table, but before I could sit, another staff member approached. "Sorry," he said, gently but firmly. "That seat is for the DJ's assistant." I nodded, pressed my lips. "I understand." Then I walked to the dimmest corner of the room, where the lights faded and the laughter thinned. I poured myself a glass of water and held it with both hands like its cold could drown the emptiness in my chest. From there, I could see the slideshow on a giant screen. Pictures of Caroline's life from childhood to now. Her with ribbons in her hair, her winning the high school dance award, graduating college, traveling through Italy. Each moment carefully chosen. And I, her sister, was missing from every single one. Like I'd never existed in her life at all. A wave of cold washed over me, not from the snow outside, but from the realization of what I once called family. I stepped into the coat room, not to take off my coat, but to breathe. A narrow room with soft yellow lighting and crowded hangers became my only refuge from the storm of distant stares outside. On a small side table was a tray of bridesmaid gifts, 10 tiny boxes, each tied with pink ribbon. I glanced at the names. Julia, Erica, Claire, Hannah. Mine wasn't there. Not a mistake. They made sure of it. I sank into a velvet chair nearby, instinctively reaching for my phone. The screen lit up, no missed calls, no new messages. I opened my messaging app, scrolling for comfort. That's when I noticed it. A new group chat. Caroline's Dream Team. I frowned. I didn't remember joining this. Maybe someone added me by accident. The last message was from 3 hours ago, from Julia, one of the bridesmaids. "Everything's pretty and perfect, just like we planned." Above it were earlier texts. "Claire, she's definitely not coming. She hates crowds." "Hannah, even better, the vibe will be lighter." Then I saw it. The one that broke me. Caroline. She doesn't fit the image. I'll just say the list is full. Having her in the wedding photos would be awkward. Below was a cringing emoji and a shaking head gif. I don't know how long I stared. Every word felt like it was carved straight into my chest. Caroline didn't just leave me out. She planned to leave me out. And the worst part was, I never suspected a thing. I left the group chat, slid my phone back into my purse, my hands trembling. Not from the cold. Not anymore. I stepped out of the coat room, no destination in mind, just needing to escape those walls closing in. While searching for an exit, I wandered into a narrow hallway between the kitchen and staff area. There, under dim yellow ceiling lights, Trays of untouched food waited to be brought out. I was about to turn back when I heard laughter from behind a cracked door, a voice so familiar it made me freeze. It was Caroline. I still can't believe she actually drove all the way here. Who does that? Then Hannah's voice. A whole road trip just to bring, what? A homemade cake that looks like it's from a discount store? Laughter burst out. I froze, held my breath. Caroline continued, her voice lower but no less cutting. If she hadn't come, everything would have been perfect. I was hoping the weather would keep her away. Claire chimed in. Maybe she would have spun out on the road or something. That way, we'd have an excuse to be sad and still enjoy the peace. This time, it wasn't just a laugh. It was an eruption of laughter, light, ruthless, and all too familiar. The kind of laughter I'd heard my entire childhood, only back then, I didn't know who it was aimed at. Now, I did. I stepped back, my hand reaching for the wall to steady myself. The floor felt like it tilted, not because I lost my balance, but because the whole world had just collapsed. None of them thought I could hear, and that's what hurt the most. Because what people say behind your back, that's what they really mean. And the truth was, I had never been wanted here. I turned away. I didn't know where I was going, but for the first time, I knew this much. I wasn't mistaken. I wouldn't excuse them anymore through blind hope. I had heard everything. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure I wanted to forgive. And return to the main hall. There was no reason to stay in a place where even breathing made my chest ache. Instead, I quietly stepped out through the side door near the kitchen, my long coat still streaked with old snow from that morning's drive. The cold wind whipped against my face like it was trying to wash away every illusion I had brought with me. But the coldest thing wasn't the weather. It was the silence from the people I once called family. I sat in my car for a long time. The engine was off, but my mind kept racing. My phone lit up with a new message. It was from my mother. Just one line. Rebecca, don't make a scene. I stared at the text, mind blank. Above it, my earlier message still sat. Mom, I'm on my way. Hope you'll all be surprised. Marked as read. No reply. I didn't respond. I had no energy left to explain or defend something that never should have needed explanation. I just wanted to be there for my sister. I sat in that darkness until the golden lights from the estate across the road disappeared into nightfall. I didn't drive home that night. I booked a room at a cheap motel 30 minutes away. My dress was wrinkled, makeup smeared after countless attempts not to cry. I didn't turn on the TV. Didn't check social media. I just lay there, staring at the stained ceiling, letting the memory of the evening drain me one breath at a time. The next morning, I woke up to my phone ringing. My head was still spinning from lack of sleep. When I opened Instagram, the first post was from Caroline. A heavily filtered photo. Caroline surrounded by her bridesmaids holding a champagne glass, soft light glowing against her satin dress. Twinkling lights behind them, just like the fairy tale wedding invites. The caption read, "A perfect night with all the people I love most." I wasn't in the photo. No tag, no mention, no thank you. Not a single trace that I had ever been there. I scrolled through the comments. Caroline, the most beautiful bride. Everything looks amazing. Wish I'd been invited. No one asked about me. No one wondered about the wedding cake, about the person who drove over 400 miles to show up, then vanished without a trace. The next message came from my cousin, Julia. Rebecca, last night wasn't easy. But I hope you understand, that party wasn't the place to ask for attention. Then another text from my mother, this time in the family group chat, family group Collins. She's going through a rough patch, let's be patient. Don't add fuel to the fire. I read it over and over, as if my brain needed multiple passes to fully understand. Rough patch. They were rewriting the story. A new version of Rebecca. Unhinged, disruptive, embarrassing. No one mentioned what I'd heard behind that kitchen door. No one asked why I left in silence. No one asked if I was okay. A message from an old friend, someone I hadn't heard from in nearly 3 years, came in. Heard the engagement party got awkward. Caroline said you caused a scene and disappeared. You all right? I didn't reply. Because I understood. I hadn't just been erased from the guest list. I'd been erased from the narrative. Like my presence was a glitch needing to be edited out. Like I had never been the main character in anyone's memory. Just an extra. Easily cut to preserve the perfect picture. I opened my laptop, created a new folder, and titled it, The Truth. In it, I saved photos of the wedding cake receipt, the untouched cake box on the kitchen counter, the snow-covered driveway from yesterday. I saved screenshots of the group chat between Caroline and her friends. But I didn't know exactly why I did it. But maybe one day, if someone ever asks, was it really that bad? I want to be able to say, yes. These are the things they'll never tell you. They could erase me from the party. They could crop me out of the photos. But I wasn't going to let them define me with silence anymore. I spent all Sunday afternoon in my small Chicago apartment, soft light from the window falling across the kitchen table, where I laid out everything others had chosen to ignore. My laptop was open, the screen showing the folder labeled The Truth, where I'd saved the things no one wanted to acknowledge. A photo of the red velvet wedding cake I brought, still sealed in its silver box, never opened. A receipt for over $200, 0 cents, paid in advance for the bakery to prepare it fresh that morning. A selfie I took in front of Caroline's estate, hair messy from the snowstorm, coat soaked through, still clutching the cake like a precious gift. I opened Instagram. The first photo I posted was of the cake outdoors, snow all around it, the gold ribbon standing out against the white. The caption read, "Not everything we bring is appreciated. That doesn't mean it has no value." The second post was the receipt, screenshot from the email confirmation. The note reading, 2-tier red velvet wedding cake. To be delivered Saturday morning for Caroline Collins. The third was a photo from inside my car, windshield covered in snow, everything outside blurred white. Like the sky itself had tried to stop me. And I came anyway. I turned off the comments. Not because I feared conflict, but because I didn't need permission to tell my story. Then, I opened my email. Recipients, Mom, Linda Collins, Aunt Martha, Caroline Collins. Subject, the wedding cake. I kept it brief. Attached is the receipt for the wedding cake I ordered, paid for, and brought on Saturday. The cake was never opened, never mentioned. I don't need thanks. I just want you to see the truth. I attached the 3 photos and hit send. Mom replied in less than 5 minutes. "Rebecca, this isn't helping. You're making things worse." And I didn't respond. I opened a new message, this time addressed to the PR department of Lockridge Financial, where Ethan Caroline's fiancé worked. I wasn't sure if they'd care, but I knew one thing. This firm cared deeply about reputation and stayed far away from personal scandals that could affect investor confidence. I didn't write much. I simply attached 2 files. A screenshot of the family group Collins chat, where my mother called me unstable and Caroline mocked me for turning this into a tragedy. A recording from that night. The one where Caroline and her friends laughed about the idea of me getting into an accident on the way. The voices were clear, sharp, unmistakable. Subject, information that may be relevant to company image. No caption, no explanation. I left it for them to decide. When it was done, I closed my laptop, poured myself a glass of water, my hands still shaking. Not out of fear of their reaction, but because for the first time I had done it. I pushed back. No yelling, no pleading to be included, just the truth, laid bare. To see if they'd still pretend not to know. A few hours later, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Rebecca, this is Lindsay from PR at Lockridge. Thank you for sharing the information. We are reviewing the content and will proceed according to company policy." I didn't know what would happen next, but the fact that they responded, something my own family hadn't done, was enough to tell me. This time, they couldn't bury it. That night, Caroline posted an Instagram story. A short video clip of flickering candles, with text across the screen. There's always someone who can't stand to see you happy. No name, no tags. But everyone knew who it was about. I just smiled and closed my phone. I didn't need to reply with words. Because this time, they had written the play. And I was only the one who pulled back the curtain so the audience could see backstage. On Wednesday morning, while I was making coffee, a text came in from Monica, an old childhood friend who lived near Caroline. "Did you hear? The family meet and greet dinner got canceled. Ethan said he needs to reevaluate everything." I stood still in the kitchen. The smell of coffee couldn't cover the shake in my wrist. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel hurt. I just felt that the truth had finally knocked on the right door. The weekend brunch at Aunt Martha's house went on as planned. A little gathering to smooth things over, as Mom had put it. I was invited reluctantly, like a side dish people only served because the hotel already included it in the menu. I arrived 10 minutes late, not because of traffic, but because I wanted to see every face as I walked in. To know who was waiting for me to speak, and who was praying I'd stay silent. Caroline sat at the center of the long table, wearing a cream knit dress, lightly made up, but the fatigue beneath her mascara was impossible to hide. Ethan wasn't there. Mom offered a stiff smile. Aunt Hartha let out a breath of relief. I nodded silently and took my assigned seat at the far end of the table, next to a vase of white tulips. Caroline spoke first, as always, her voice sweet with a hint of reflection. "This past week has been an emotional journey. I think we've all seen where the strength of family truly lies." Heads nodded around the table. Everyone knew what she meant. And who she meant. I set my water glass down, wiped the rim with a napkin, and looked up. "I'd like to say a few words, too." Caroline paused. "Rebecca, today isn't..." "Just 1 minute," I said, calm but firm. I took out my phone, opened the saved audio clip, and hit play. Caroline's voice rang out, clear but ice cold. "She doesn't fit the image. I'll just say the list is full. Having her in the wedding photos would be awkward." Laughter followed, then Julia's voice. "Maybe she'll spin out on the road. That way, we'd have a reason to be sad, and peace, too." The room was full, but completely silent. Only their own words played back through the small speaker, each sentence like a verdict. Caroline turned pale. My mother set down her glass, her composure gone. Aunt Martha covered her mouth. No more nods now. I stopped the recording after 10 seconds. "Enough. That's what I heard at Caroline's engagement party," I said, my voice oddly steady. "I thought I came with a gift, with love. But I was just an inconvenience to be hidden." Caroline stood. "Rebecca, that was a joke?" I interrupted. "A careless moment? Or a plan all along?" No one answered. I looked straight at my mother, then at Aunt Martha. "If I didn't have that recording, would any of you believe me?" My mother said nothing. Her eyes drifted away. "Does Ethan know?" a relative asked, clearly uneasy. Caroline swallowed. "He needs time to think." I nodded. "Good. He should know who he's marrying." I didn't wait for a response. I stood, gently pushed the chair back in, and looked around the table. At the faces that once turned away at the party, now watching me like they were seeing me for the first time. As I walked out the door, Aunt Martha followed. She touched my arm and whispered, "Or you didn't just stand up for yourself. You reminded this family that the truth still deserves a voice." I just nodded and stepped into the bright morning sun. Above, the clouds were parting, revealing a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. For the first time in years, I felt no need to explain myself. Because this time, they had said it all. A week had passed since that brunch, and my phone remained completely silent. No apologies, no check-ins, just a few Instagram notifications from old friends liking the post of the wedding cake I had brought through the snowstorm, and a handful of quiet messages from people who, like me, had once been pushed aside by their families. I didn't try to reach out to Caroline. I wasn't angry anymore. I just felt empty. As if a long chapter had closed, with no tragic ending, no need for resolution, just done. On Friday night, while folding laundry, my phone rang. The screen lit up with a familiar name, Caroline. I hesitated. My hand hovered over the decline button, then stopped. Finally, I set the phone on the table, hit accept, and put it on speaker. "Rebecca," her voice was hoarse. "I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but please, just once." I said nothing. I was wrong," Caroline continued, each word sounding like it was fighting its way through icy water. "My whole life, people compared me to you. You were independent, smart, never needed anyone. And I always had to work harder just to be seen." I leaned back in my chair, staring up at the ceiling. I never thought I'd hear this from Caroline. "I was jealous of you," she admitted plainly. "Even at my own engagement party, I felt scared. Scared of how Ethan looked at you when you walked in. Scared of people praising you for driving through a snowstorm. Scared that once again, I'd be the shadow." I closed my eyes. The familiar ache returned. Not because of her words, but because I'd once wished to hear them so much sooner. "But that doesn't excuse what I did," Caroline said, her voice cracking. "It was selfish and cowardly. I left you off the guest list, laughed behind your back, then spun a story that made you the problem. I know. Nothing can undo that." I exhaled slowly and replied, "You're right. Nothing can undo it. But I also don't want to carry those scars forever." There was a pause. Then Caroline asked, barely above a whisper, "Can you forgive me?" I thought about it. Forgiveness didn't mean starting over. It didn't mean stepping into the same circle again. "I don't hate you, Caroline," I said honestly. "But I can't go back to the way things were. Some relationships need to end for both sides to grow." Caroline didn't respond. We just sat in silence, breathing on opposite ends of a broken bridge. Then she said goodbye. Not tearful, not dramatic. Just an ending that arrived right on time. The next day I went to the local bakery, the same one where I had ordered the red velvet cake. The shop owner remembered me and smiled when she saw me walk in. "What'll it be this time?" she asked. I smiled gently. "Just a small cake, vanilla frosting, simple design, no message, just sweet and honest." That evening, I placed the cake in the center of my kitchen table, lit a small candle, not for a birthday, not for an anniversary, just to mark a moment when I chose myself over trying to please anyone else. I poured a cup of hot tea, sliced a piece of cake, and sat by the window, watching light snow fall outside. In my hand was my phone, already open to a draft. After countless edits, I was finally ready to post the final message. To anyone who's ever felt like the extra in their own family story, you're not wrong. You're not too sensitive. You're just being real, and that has never been something to apologize for. I once walked through a snowstorm to bring the best of myself, and I left empty-handed. But I'm no longer sorry, because now I know. Family isn't made by blood. It's built on mutual choice. And I've finally chosen me. I hit post. No waiting, no fear, just relief, like setting down a weight I'd carried for too long. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Not out of anxiety, not out of lingering sadness, just because there was nothing to hide from anymore. The winter light slipped gently through the curtains, softer than I expected. I made coffee and stood by the kitchen window, looking out at the thin sheet of ice still clinging to the street. I wasn't thinking much about what Caroline had said the night before, not because I forgot, but because I no longer needed to keep it in my head like a wound. For the first time in years, my mind felt like it had room to breathe. A few hours later, I received a message from a former coworker. Melissa, I read your post. I went through something similar with my cousin. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. Then another from someone I'd known in college. You're not alone. Family isn't always the safest place. All morning, my inbox filled with messages from people who had once been silent when I needed to be seen. Now, when I no longer waited for anyone's approval, my voice had somehow helped others feel seen too. It was something I never expected. That my story, which once felt small and misplaced, could reach so many. And I realized, sometimes silence isn't peace. It's quiet erasure. The silence from Caroline, from Mom, from those who saw me sitting alone at that party and turned away, it wasn't because they didn't know what was happening. It was because they chose not to acknowledge me. Because I made them uncomfortable. Because I didn't fit the narrative they wanted to present. And I had been silent too long. I was afraid that if I spoke up, I'd be seen as the troublemaker, the too emotional daughter, the one who ruined the mood. But the truth is, that so-called peace was never meant for me. The moment I spoke, hit post, played the audio, sent the email, that's when I stopped being the victim in someone else's story. I became the one writing it over. Telling the truth doesn't make you bad, it sets you free. Not everyone will understand. Not everyone will applaud. Some family members quietly unfollowed me. Didn't message, didn't call. But for the first time in my life, I didn't need them to. I didn't need anyone to confirm I was right, to know I wasn't wrong. That afternoon, I walked to the bakery. Not to buy another cake, but to thank the owner for the quiet kindness she gave when my own family couldn't. She smiled and didn't ask questions, only said, "When you first came in, I had a feeling that cake wasn't just for celebration." I nodded. It was the last gift I brought to a door that had already closed. On the walk home, snow started to fall. Gently, steadily, not harsh, not bitter, just soft, like it was laying down a fresh layer of clean white over everything. I stopped in the middle of the street, tilted my face toward the sky, and thought, not every storm comes to destroy. Some come only to clear the sky. And I had walked through a storm like that. That night, I pulled out the old journal I had set aside when I was 26. I turned to the first page, where I had once written, "Maybe if I'm gentle enough, they'll let me stay." I smiled and gently crossed out that line with a blue ink pen, then wrote a new one just below it. No one has the right to keep or cast someone out if that person has chosen to walk forward in their own truth. I closed the journal, turned off the lights, and left a small candle burning quietly in the corner of the kitchen. And for the first time in a very long while, I slept deeply. No dreams, no jolts awake, no voices echoing in my mind. Only peace, not from forgetting, but from finally facing everything and letting go. Rebecca's story isn't just about leaving a party. It's about returning to herself. From someone who always tried to be accepted by a family that never truly listened, she found the courage to speak up, face the pain, and release old expectations. Rebecca shows us that the truth, even when hard to hear, always deserves to be spoken. And sometimes, the strongest thing we can do isn't to forgive, but to no longer need someone in order to be at peace. What do you think about Rebecca's choice? Would you dare to speak up if your own family shut you out? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about family and life. That afternoon, I was wrapping up my final meeting with a client at the law firm in downtown Chicago when my phone rang. The screen showed an unfamiliar number, but it was from a bank. I frowned and answered. "Hello, this is Brad Coleman from Horizon First Bank. I need to verify some information related to a mortgage loan for a property at 720 Glenwood Drive." I blinked. Glenwood Drive? I didn't own any property there. "You must have the wrong person," I replied politely. "I don't have any loans tied to that address." "I understand your surprise," the man said, his voice lowering slightly with hesitation. "But your name, Emma Carter, is listed as a co-signer on a mortgage application under the primary applicant, Madison Carter. Your sister. I froze. The pen slipped from my hand and hit the desk. That's impossible. I've never signed anything related to my sister's loan. I understand, but the loan was approved 7 months ago. All documents carry your signature. Your parents brought the paperwork to the branch themselves. I held my breath. A rush of images flashed through my mind. My mother's avoiding gaze during Christmas dinner. The awkward silence every time I mentioned Madison's new house. And especially when they handed me a few health insurance forms at Dad's birthday party, saying I just needed to sign because it was time for renewal. I tried to steady my voice. I need a copy of all the documents. Immediately. I'll email them in the next few minutes, Brad replied. But there's another issue. The payments are more than 2 months overdue. The current balance is around $17,800.00. My chest tightened. I couldn't even register the rest of what Brad was saying. Once the call ended, I dialed Alex, my best friend since college, also a civil attorney, and the only person I knew who wouldn't judge me for saying something this insane. They forged my signature, I blurted when he picked up. Madison, my parents, all of them. Alex didn't ask a single question. I'll be there in 15 minutes. When Alex arrived, I had already received Brad's email. We opened the PDF file, and in an instant, every suspicion turned into pure anger. The signature line on the mortgage declaration didn't just resemble mine. It had the same little loop at the end of the A in Emma, just like my mother's handwriting. Alex tapped the screen. They didn't even bother to make it a perfect match. This is a serious offense. I nodded. My hands were shaking when my phone lit up. My mom was calling. I handed the phone to Alex, who gestured, "Answer it. Try to stay calm." I took a deep breath and accepted the call. "Hi, Mom." "Sweetheart, are you free tonight? Your dad's making your favorite spaghetti and meatballs." I almost laughed at the irony. Perfect, because I wanted to talk to you too. About a very interesting call I got from Horizon Bank. There was silence on the other end. Then she spoke, her voice stammering. "I was going to tell you soon, really. It's just... Madison needed help, and you're doing so well." "So your solution was to forge my signature? Do you realize this could cost me my job, my law license?" "You're overreacting, Emma. We're family. Families help each other." I clenched my jaw, fighting to stay composed. "Help each other? Or just help Madison? You put me in nearly $18,000, 0 cents of debt, and didn't say a word. Madison will pay it back. She just needs time." I cut her off, staring at the computer screen showing 3 overdue payments. "I'm coming over tonight. Madison better be there too. We need to talk. Clearly." I ended the call, still shaking. Alex closed the laptop. "Do you want to press charges?" I sank into my chair, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. "I don't know," I whispered, "but I need the truth. All of it." Alex placed a hand on my shoulder. "Then we start tonight." I nodded, something shifting inside me, not pain, but resolve. My family wanted to use my success as a shield for their bad decisions. Fine. Now they'll learn what it's like to face a lawyer. Alex returned to my office at 8 p.m., carrying his laptop, a bag of sandwiches, and a look more serious than I'd ever seen. "You need to eat something before you lose it," he said, setting the food down and pulling up a chair. "I've started digging into the bank and 3 other financial companies. This is not just a mortgage." I stared at his screen as files began to pop up. My name, my personal email, my social security number. "Emma," he said quietly, "there are 3 credit cards in your name, opened in less than 6 months. The combined credit limit is almost $70,000, 0 cents, and they're all maxed out." I collapsed into the chair, my heart pounding. "No way. I've only ever applied for 1 card, my Amex from 2019. "And that's just the surface," Alex said, flipping to another screen. There's also an unsecured personal loan for $50,000, 0 cents, from a finance company in Iowa, disbursed 4 months ago. And worse, an investment account in your name was used as collateral for a business loan. I jumped up. What? I don't own a business? You don't need to, Alex said calmly. They just needed paperwork and a signature, which they've gotten very good at faking. I paced across the office, mind racing. 7 months. For 7 months, I had lived, worked, and believed my financial life was secure. And in that time, the people closest to me had used my identity as a shield for their debt. Your credit score has tanked, Alex added. When was the last time you checked? About 6 months ago, I answered. It was 812. It's 613 now. I slumped back in the chair, completely drained. My career... Alex, if the firm finds out, they'll start asking questions. If there's an investigation, I could be implicated, just for being the account holder. That's why we need to act fast, he said seriously. I've already contacted Nora, a financial fraud expert at our main office. She's agreed to help, but needs every single document. How much more do you think I don't know? I asked, my throat tight. Hard to say, Alex shook his head. If they forged a signature for a mortgage, there's nothing stopping them from using your identity for investments, more credit, even tax filings. My phone rang. It was Madison. I didn't answer. We'll take it step by step, Alex said, pulling out a folder. First, you need to contact the 3 credit bureaus to freeze your report. Then we'll file fraud reports with every institution that opened accounts in your name without consent. I nodded, still dizzy. What's the total? Estimated damages so far, about $292,000. 0 cents. Could be more if we find other hidden accounts. It felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. Nearly $300,000, 0 cents. Not because I made bad choices or overspent, but because my own family decided I could handle it. I need to know what else they're hiding, I whispered. If I'm the target, who knows what else they've done? Alex nodded. I'll coordinate with Nora. I think you should also bring in an independent legal analyst to review all transactions on your accounts. A thought struck me. Wait. Mom borrowed my laptop twice last month, said she needed to check email. And Madison, she came to my office on my birthday and stayed late. She could have seen account info. Alex opened his laptop, accessed my remote login history. A few seconds later, he turned the screen toward me. There's an unauthorized login from your mom's home IP right after Madison's visit. So, that's it, I said, voice hollow. They didn't just take advantage of me. They planned it. Alex paused. What do you want to do next? I looked at him. The answer was clear. No turning back. Tomorrow night, I'll confront them. But not as family. I'm going to let them know I know everything. And this time, I'm not going alone. I stepped into the suburban house my parents had lived in for over 20 years, feeling like a stranger. Everything looked just as it did on Thanksgiving. The worn carpet, the family portrait in the living room, and the familiar scent of roast chicken Mom always made when she was hiding something. Madison sat at the dining table, eyes puffy. My dad stood near the stove, back turned, saying nothing. My mom looked up from the couch with a forced smile. Emma, you're here, she said, like nothing had happened. I didn't respond. I placed a thick stack of documents on the table, printed from Alex's files. Let's not pretend. These are copies of every credit account, loan, and investment fraudulently opened in my name. Mom glanced quickly at the file, then looked away. Madison broke down in tears. You don't understand, she stammered. I didn't mean to, I just needed a little help with the down payment for the house, and then things got out of control. Didn't mean to? I cut her off, my voice cold. Madison, you used my credit score to take out a $180,000 0 cents loan. You went shopping with credit cards in my name. And you used my investment account as collateral for your own loan. You call that a little help? That's when my dad finally spoke, his voice low and tired. She just needed a start. And you already have everything, Emma. A career, money, a reputation. Madison just needed a chance. I stared at him. So you both thought forging my signature and using my identity as a financial tool was reasonable. My mom stood up and stepped closer. We're family, Emma. I know this was wrong, but I believed you would understand. I believed you'd forgive us. I stepped back half a pace. Forgiveness is not on my to-do list today. Madison grabbed my arm, tears streaming down her face. I'll pay it back, I promise. I just need time. I pulled out my phone and opened a photo of her credit card statement. Last month, you spent nearly $9,000, 0 cents at a spa, and $3.50 on designer handbags. How exactly do you plan to pay that back? How much do you earn per month? Silence. The question sliced through the living room like a blade. I don't know, Madison admitted, her voice so soft I had to tilt my head to hear. I don't have a steady job. I nodded. Then, I'm sorry, but you can't pay it back. And if you both truly believe that love is enough reason to destroy my credit, career, and reputation, then maybe we're not even speaking the same language anymore. My mom burst into tears. Emma, please, don't do this. Your sister, she'll lose her house. I looked at Madison, now trembling like a child caught red-handed. Then I looked back at my parents, the same people who once taught me that honesty was a core value, now standing there hoping I'd just look the other way. I've contacted a lawyer, I said slowly. Tomorrow morning, I'm filing an identity fraud complaint with the State Financial Crimes Unit. My dad scowled. You're really going to take your own family to court? I'm not taking anyone anywhere, I replied. You brought this on yourselves when you chose to exploit me without asking. Madison whispered, You can't do this. I'm your sister. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. You are my sister. But you're also the person who wrecked the career I spent a decade building. You don't get to steal everything from someone and then ask them to smile and forgive you. My mom collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. My dad stayed silent. Madison could only stare at me, panic in her eyes. I walked toward the door and turned back one last time. I'm not doing this out of anger. I'm doing it for justice, because if I stay quiet now, there will be a next time. And another after that, until there's nothing left for me to protect. I closed the door behind me, leaving behind the tears, the betrayal, and the endlessly repeated excuse, we're family. Because for the first time in my life, I realized, family is not a license to hurt someone and call it love. 3 days after confronting my family, I was sitting in the office of Solstice James, a senior financial advisor at the law firm I was working with. Alex had made the introduction, and within 5 minutes of meeting her, I knew why. Solstice didn't say much. She simply studied each data line, typing with precision as if decoding a cursed treasure map. I sat beside her, cold sweat soaking the back of my shirt, as I watched the screen fill with numbers and account names I had never seen before. Emma, she finally said, almost 2 hours into tracing the transactions, we have a much bigger problem than you think. I looked up. How big? Big enough to call the FBI. I held my breath. Solstice turned the screen toward me. I've been tracking a series of suspicious transactions from your investment account, used as collateral for a so-called private investment fund named Riverpine Growth Fund. Ring any bells? I shook my head. Exactly. It doesn't exist, but several members of the Windmere Golf Club, where your parents are regulars, have invested in it. She pulled up a spreadsheet. I traced the flow of funds. A total of $5,200,000, 0 cents, passed through at least 4 intermediary accounts. 2 in the US, 1 in Belize, and 1 anonymous account in Luxembourg. Oh my God. I pushed my chair back, struggling to breathe. It doesn't stop there. Solstice continued. They used your financial records and reputation, including a copy of your real investment portfolio, to convince others to contribute. Your name, your photo, your investment account, even fake email exchanges showing you as the fund manager. What, they faked my email? They created one nearly identical, e.carter.consult@gmail.com. They also replicated your e-signature. I suspect there's a keylogger installed on your office computer, or a shared device. I dropped my head into my hands, my heart racing. So, they didn't just scam me. They used me to scam others? Exactly. These people believed they were investing in a fund run by a successful young attorney. They trusted your personal profile, your perfect credit score, your job title. It was a sophisticated setup. Just then, Alex walked in with a coffee and a look of barely concealed tension. I got a message from a bank employee. Emma's father and a friend just tried to withdraw $200,000, 0 cents, from a joint account, but the system flagged it and froze the transaction. Good, Solstice nodded. We need to stop them before the money disappears completely. I still couldn't catch my breath. What about the victims? Has anyone come forward yet? Not yet, Solstice said. They're all older, well-respected, and reluctant to admit they were fooled. Some are old friends of your parents. Others were your mom's college classmates. I was stunned. The people who trusted my family most were the ones being hurt the worst. There's someone you need to meet, Solstice said, stepping out briefly. She returned moments later with a woman whose neatly styled gray hair and beige coat I recognized instantly. Mrs. Helen Ward, my former high school teacher and my mother's longtime friend. Hello, Emma, she said softly. She said I could trust you. I stood and shook her hand. I'm so sorry. If I had known sooner. She shook her head, eyes misty. I believed in your mother, in your image. Young, successful, financially savvy. They said you ran the fund. I withdrew my entire retirement savings. My throat tightened. I'll do everything I can to recover that money, I promised. I swear. Alex nodded. We've prepared a full case file. We'll submit it to the Federal Investigation Office in the morning, Solstice added. We're also compiling a complete list of victims. Once the case is launched, they'll receive protection and legal support. I looked at the whiteboard on the wall, covered in sticky notes with victim names, dollar amounts, and transaction dates. It looked like the blueprint of a massive fraud scheme, with my name right in the middle. How much time do we have? I asked. Not much, Alex replied. They're panicking. Wait too long and the money could vanish into other banking systems, beyond our reach. I clenched my fists. Then we start now. That morning, I walked into the Hallridge Bank headquarters with Alex and Solstice, carrying a thick file filled with forged emails, financial statements, IP access logs, and a verified list of fraudulent investments. Frank Delaney, the branch manager, stood up when he saw us, a flicker of surprise and tension crossing his face. Emma? I just met with your parents earlier today, he said, trying to maintain a neutral tone. They claim you're trying to tarnish the family's reputation and even threatened to sue you for defamation. I placed the file on his desk and looked him straight in the eye. Then I suggest you take a look at what I brought with me today. Frank sat down, opening the documents, reading each page slowly. The calm in his eyes gradually gave way to concern, especially as he reviewed Solstice's analysis of the suspicious transactions, specifically the money trail from the Riverpine Growth Fund to anonymous offshore accounts. Oh my God, he exhaled as he reached the IP address report. All mortgage applications, investment activity, and credit card openings were executed from the same location, your parents' home. Solstice nodded. We also extracted device identification logs. All actions originated from a personal laptop that matches the one Madison brought with her to Emma's office. Frank closed the folder, his face now stiff as stone. I'll have to escalate this to our internal legal team immediately. The bank will need to freeze all related accounts pending investigation. We've already sent the same report to the Northridge County Police Department and the Federal Financial Crimes Office, Alex added. Officers should arrive shortly. Less than an hour later, 2 plainclothes officers entered the bank. I recognized them from an earlier meeting, Inspector Hope and Deputy Inspector Morales. Ms. Carter, thank you for cooperating. We've reviewed the evidence. It's time to bring in the parties involved. I waited in the back conference room as Frank called my parents and Madison, asking them to return to the bank to clarify some information regarding the mortgage paperwork. All 3 agreed immediately, probably still thinking they were ahead of the game. When they entered the room, my mother was the first to speak, her voice casual like walking into a cocktail party. Frank, I'm so glad you called. We thought it best to clear things up with Emma as soon as possible. My father gave me a curt nod. Madison wouldn't meet my eyes. Clear things up. Exactly, I said, pushing the file across the table. Please review this. It contains evidence of identity theft, fraud, financial manipulation, and violations of federal law. A frozen silence fell over the room. Madison trembled, eyes wide. My mother snatched the file and flipped through it frantically. My father's face turned red, his hand tightening into a fist. Emma, he growled. What do you think you're doing? I'm stopping the 3 of you from continuing to ruin my life, and the lives of at least 14 other people, I replied. You called it helping family. I call it what it is. Organized crime. My mother slammed her hand on the table. You're going to put your entire family in jail over a few mistakes? Madison is your sister. No, I said, locking eyes with her. I'm bringing criminals to justice, no matter what last name they have. At that moment, the 2 officers stepped forward, flashing their badges. Gordon Carter, Helen Carter, Madison Carter, you are being placed under arrest under a summons from the Federal Financial Court for charges of fraud, financial crimes, identity theft, and operating an unlicensed investment scheme. My mother's jaw dropped. This is a mistake. We're the victims. She made this up. Madison broke down in tears. I didn't know anything about those offshore accounts. I just helped Mom and Dad convince a few friends to invest. My father tried to stand, but Morales stepped in. Sir, we advise you remain silent. Anything you say now may be used as evidence in court. As they were led out of the room, my mother looked back at me, eyes filled with fury. You'll regret this, Emma. Families don't do this to each other. I said nothing. I simply watched until the 3 of them disappeared behind the glass door. My heart no longer felt heavy. Alex stepped beside me. You okay? Not quite, but I'm on the right path. I opened my phone to find messages from several victims, people I once called family friends, thanking me for standing up for the truth. Federal Courtroom 4 in Chicago was packed on the day my family's trial officially began. I sat in the front row, among legal representatives and witnesses, clutching my statement folder, my heart pounding like it no longer belonged to me. Across the room, my father, Gordon Carter, sat in an old gray suit, looking more worn than I had ever seen. My mother, Helen Carter, sat quietly beside him, occasionally glancing at me with pleading eyes. And Madison, my sister, looked like a faded shadow, pale and hollow-eyed, lips dry, gaze fixed downward. Judge Roberts opened the trial with a commanding tone. The defense attorneys leaned on familiar tropes: unintentional, family pressure, financial hardship. But when Prosecutor Whitaker stood up, their narrative began to unravel. We intend to prove these actions were not the result of ignorance, but of a deliberate, organized scheme, he said. The defendants didn't just defraud elderly victims, they weaponized their daughter's identity and reputation to fabricate credibility. I was called to the stand shortly after opening statements. My steps felt heavy, but when I looked at the front row, where Miss Ward and 4 other victims sat, I knew I couldn't falter. My name is Emma Carter, I began, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm a corporate attorney at Rothman & Lindley. Within less than a year, I discovered my identity had been used to open 3 credit cards, 2 loans, and a fake investment account under my name. I presented every piece of evidence, every forged email, every IP trace from my parents' house, every call I'd received from banks when my account was used as collateral. I wasn't just betrayed, I said, locking eyes with Madison. I was turned into a shield for criminal behavior. My family used my success to lure others into investing in a non-existent fund. The prosecution presented bank statements, victim testimonies, and, notably, social media photos. My mother in designer dresses on a yacht, my father posing at a golf course in Florida, taken at the exact times large withdrawals were made from victims' accounts. Gasps echoed in the courtroom as Ms. Ward explained she had invested solely because she believed I was managing the fund. Madison's lawyer argued she should be treated separately from the case, claiming she only followed her parents' instructions. But when the prosecution showed she had submitted a job application using my resume, complete with my law degree, e-signature, and bar license number, no one doubted her involvement. The judge flipped through the case files for nearly an hour before looking up. Based on the evidence presented, the testimony of the victims, and charges from the federal prosecutor's office, the court hereby sentences. The room was so tense I could hear the sound of a stapler clicking from the clerk's desk. Gordon Carter, 18 years in federal prison with no parole for the first 10 years. Helen Carter, 15 years in federal prison. Madison Carter, 12 years in federal prison and permanent disqualification from all financial representation or practice. Madison broke down crying on the spot. My mother slumped into her chair, her face pale. My father said nothing, staring straight ahead, his eyes hollow. All assets connected to the case, including real estate, vehicles, jewelry, and domestic bank accounts, will be seized as restitution for the victims, the judge continued. The court also orders the recovery of funds held in international banks, in cooperation with the FBI. I felt Mrs. Ward gently take my hand. "You did the right thing," she whispered. I wanted to believe that, but a part of me still ached. Because doing the right thing also meant losing my family. As the police led the 3 of them out of the courtroom, Madison turned back, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know it would go this far." I didn't respond, because I knew she did know. They all did. And they kept going, even when the cliff's edge was in sight. The trial ended, but my journey, for justice, for truth, and for the victims, was just beginning. 1 week after the trial, I returned to Rothman and Lindley with a completely different mindset. I was no longer Emma Carter, the daughter trying to uphold her family's honor. I came back as a survivor of an earthquake called betrayed trust, and I knew I wasn't alone. Less than 2 days after the sentencing, I received an email from the board of directors. They invited me to lead a new initiative called Reclaim and Rise, a legal and emotional support program for victims of financial fraud committed by family members. "We believe no one is more qualified than you," the CEO wrote, "not just because of your expertise, but because you've lived it. You understand the pain, and you've turned it into purpose." I stared at that email for hours, torn. Part of me wanted to shut that chapter for good, to lock it away in the past. But the braver part of me knew this wasn't an end. It was a beginning. I said yes. In my first week as director, I barely slept. Together with Solstice and Alex, we began laying the foundation for the program. A hotline was launched, a website went live within 10 days, and within a week, over 300 people had reached out. Mostly middle-aged women, elderly individuals, or people who had been betrayed by someone they trusted. One of the first calls that shook me came from a 67-year-old woman named Marlene. "I borrowed my entire retirement fund to help my son start a business," she said over the phone. "Now he's gone, no money, no home, and I feel stupid." I sat in my office, clutching the phone, my voice catching. No one is stupid for trusting someone they love, but having the courage to rise after betrayal, That's extraordinary. At the same time, I decided to do something I had been avoiding for months: cleaning out my parents' old apartment. After their assets were seized for restitution, the remainder had been turned over to local authorities. They gave me the right to retrieve any personal items unrelated to the case. Walking into the house I grew up in, it felt like time had frozen. The wooden clock my mother used to polish weekly was still there. The family photos on the walls, their fake smiles now gave me chills. I stepped into my old bedroom and searched through Madison's dresser drawers, only to find a worn leather notebook, brittle with age. On the first page, in her handwriting, were the words, "Riverpine Plan, don't let Emma find out." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, not in anger, but to let go. That evening, I held the first support group meeting in a small hall sponsored by the firm. I had prepared a speech, but as I looked around at the weathered faces in the room, faces that had once known fear, confusion, and now showed hope, I folded the paper in front of me. "I'm not here to tell anyone how to heal," I said slowly. "I'm here because I once sat exactly where you are now. I once believed that family was the safest place, until they crossed every line I thought couldn't be crossed." The room went still. Then a young woman named Lindsay stood up, tears falling. "Thank you for saying what I never dared to admit." After that meeting, I received dozens of messages, handwritten notes, even small gifts. Not out of gratitude, but because they no longer felt alone. I no longer had a mother, a father, or a sister in the true sense of the word. But I had found a new kind of family, one that didn't demand perfection, only honesty and compassion. One autumn afternoon, I sat on a bench near the office, watching sunlight filter through the leaves. Solstice arrived, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Emma, do you think you'll ever forgive them?" she asked gently. I thought for a moment, then smiled. I don't know if forgiveness even matters anymore. But I know this: I've forgiven myself. For staying silent, for enduring it, for believing that if I were just good enough, they wouldn't do what they did. Solstice nodded. "And now?" I looked toward the skyline, where so many people were trying to rebuild their lives. "Now, I use my voice to protect the ones who never had a chance. That's how I begin again. That's how I choose to go on." That evening, I stood alone in the auditorium where Reclaim and Rise held its first conference. The room was empty, the chairs stacked, warm golden lights glowing on the stage, where I had just shared my story with hundreds of others. People who had also been betrayed by family. On a small table in the corner sat dozens of handwritten notes, messages left behind by attendees. One of them read, "I used to think I was weak for not being able to forgive, but thanks to you, I see now. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is cut off what's toxic." I held the note, feeling the shaky words as if they were part of me. For years, I had fooled myself into believing that love meant enduring, that preserving the image of family was sacred. But now I understand. Real strength doesn't lie in quietly absorbing pain. It lies in speaking up, in protecting ourselves and others from the cycle of abuse and lies. I used to be the daughter who tried to please everyone, who thought that if I worked harder, was kinder, more successful, my family would truly love me. But the truth is, love is not something you earn by trying harder. It's given freely, with respect and presence. And if it doesn't come with those things, it's not love. It's possession. I remembered the day I stood in court, testifying in front of the 3 people I once thought were my anchors. In that moment, it wasn't just pain in my heart. It was a quiet resolve. Never let anyone else go through this without someone in their corner. Since then, I've met hundreds of people. A single mother betrayed by her own brother who took out a loan in her name and disappeared. An elderly man living on disability whose daughter used his name to buy a luxury car. a young college student burdened with debt after his parents used his identity to apply for a loan for his younger siblings' tuition. Different stories, same heartbreak, the betrayal of someone you once loved without question. And I began to realize sometimes we have to redefine the word family. Family isn't blood. It's not about shared names or shared roofs. Family is where you're safe from exploitation, where trust is honored, not abused, where you don't have to prove your worth to be loved. I looked up at the banner hanging behind the stage, the program's motto in bold white letters: "Justice begins with truth." Alex stepped in through the side door, carrying 2 cups of hot tea. He handed me one and sat down in the chair beside me. "You did great today," he said. "Not just for what you shared, but for how you made people feel like they're not alone anymore." I smiled. "I just don't want anyone going through this to feel weak or wrong for choosing to walk away." "Your old family." Alex hesitated. "Do you ever think about forgiving them?" I looked out the window, where the sunset was slowly fading. "I don't hold on to hatred," I replied. "But forgiveness doesn't mean letting them back in. Forgiveness is for peace of mind, not a second chance for them." Alex nodded. "I get that." I turned to him, my eyes steady. "I'm no longer chasing love from people who hurt me. I'm building a new kind of family. One made of people who listen, who respect, who care. People like you, like Solstice, like everyone who stood up today and told their story." I raised my cup of tea. To truth, to courage, and to a new definition of family. Alex clinked his cup against mine. To the new beginnings we choose. And as night gently settled outside, I knew my life was no longer tied to the past. I had lost a family, but I found myself. And from that, I began to rewrite what family meant. With my own hands. Emma's story is a powerful reminder that family doesn't always mean safety or love. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from those closest to us. But Emma proved that true strength lies not in staying silent to protect a false image, but in standing up, choosing truth, and protecting herself and others from harm. She not only reclaimed her dignity, but turned her pain into purpose, helping others step out of the shadows. What do you think about Emma's journey and her brave choices? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more raw, heartfelt, and inspiring family stories.